For this book presentation, I chose to read Lipstick Jihad by Azadeh Moaveni. I was drawn to this book for a number of reasons. First, the title stuck out to me and made me curious about what lipstick jihad could mean. Second, ever since my deployment to the Middle East, I have been interested in learning more about cultures in that area. So many things interest me about that area, including the different religious beliefs, political unrest in the region, and just the people who make up the population of these countries. Finally, I wanted to read a book about the Middle East that was written by someone who's actually from a country in the Middle East. That's why I chose this book to review. In addition to writing Lipstick Jihad, Azadeh Moaveni has also written Honeymoon in Tehran, as well as co-authored Iran Awakening with Nobel Peace Prize winner Shireen Ebadi. Born in California, Moaveni grew up in San Jose and studied politics at the University of California, Santa Cruz. She also received a Fulbright Fellowship to Egypt. After graduating from college, Moaveni moved to Iran as a journalist at Time magazine to cover society and politics in the Middle East. Moaveni speaks Farsi and Arabic and is one of the few American-born correspondents allowed to work in Iran since 1999. She focuses on women's rights, youth culture, and Islamic reform. Moaveni is currently a Time magazine contributing writer on Iran and the Middle East. Born and raised in the United States, Moaveni feels like she does not belong. In fact, Moaveni essentially lives two different lives, two different lifestyles based on who she's with. While at home with her family, especially her mother, Moaveni adheres to the Iranian cultural expectations bestowed upon her. However, in school and with her friends, Moaveni would listen to Madonna and would act more, quote, American in the way that she conducted herself. As a child, she had visited Iran and had wonderful memories of the times that she spent with her family, especially in the Iranian gardens, and felt as though she needed to understand that part of herself in greater depth. After the Iranian hostage crisis, however, it became more and more difficult for Moaveni to associate with her Iranian side, especially in school and in other public places, so she distanced herself from that culture whenever it was convenient. After graduating from college, Moaveni went back to Iran on a personal search to figure out her relationship with Iran. Once she arrived in Tehran and began working as a journalist, Moaveni realized what the revolution in Iran was about and how the country was being torn by those who wanted to protect the Islamic control of Iran and those who sought reform and the end of the Islamic regime. The main issue in this book, as it relates to higher education, is the experiences of students who come from more than one cultural background. In this case, Moaveni was uncomfortable with her Iranian side when she was in the United States, not because she didn't like her Iranian culture, but because she was afraid of not being accepted by American students or just American society in general. She spoke of numerous times in which her family members embarrassed her by acting too Iranian in public. In fact, she talks about one time where her mother would go into the classroom in front of all these American students and would show some of the Iranian traditions for some of the things that they did, and she talked about how embarrassing that was to her. Especially after the Iran hostage crisis, Moaveni did not want anyone to know about her Iranian heritage. Ultimately, Moaveni moved back to Iran because she identified more with her Iranian heritage than she ever did with her American heritage. It is important to higher education administrators to become as culturally aware as possible about where our students are coming from and what the students are going through just to make it through a day of classes. While some students only need to be concerned about showing up to class, participating in discussions and group work, completing assignments, and making sure that they turn things in on time, we have other students, lots of other students, who are dealing with cultural issues, much like Moaveni's. It is important for administrators to meet students where they are and understand the cultural differences and how they can assist these students with those differences, and really how those differences can be beneficial to the class rather than a source of embarrassment for the student. Throughout the book, Moaveni highlights the reality that relationships between Iran and the United States are strained due to decades-old issues and controversies and beliefs that are not as developed as they could be. In the United States, many people know only about Iran through what is seen on television, newspapers, other stories that show the negatives of the country, but doesn't depict the many well-meaning and democratic-seeking Iranian citizens. In Iran, Moaveni described those in support of an Islamic regime who were in control of the country, and how they were very anti-American and directed the citizens of Iran, oftentimes through force and even scare tactics, to vocalize anger and hatred toward the United States. Moaveni's accounts of her experiences highlight the need for people of each country, the United States and Iran, to understand that we can't fit everyone from each one of these countries into a perfect belief, a perfect description, or a perfect stereotype. Diversity in this case is about truly getting to know the cultures of the peoples from each country, and then accepting those cultures without making them feel embarrassed, without making them feel ashamed to represent that part of their heritage. Moaveni has so much experience covering the Middle East and Iran specifically, so I would have many questions that I would like to ask her. However, related to the book itself, I would want to know if she would have moved back to Iran if her experiences in the United States were different. What if she had positive experiences with displaying her Iranian heritage in the United States? What if she didn't have to feel embarrassed when her mother visited the classroom and students were actually excited and wanted to learn more about it? Would she still have gone to Iran to feel like she needed to develop herself there and develop her Iranian heritage there, or would she have stayed in the United States and tried to do so here? I found this book very informative about the state of Iran after the revolution and throughout the reform movement and beyond. Mostly I liked reading this memoir about Moaveni's personal experiences because she was very descriptive about how she felt and then described very well how her experiences shaped her life. As a higher education administrator, this book can be applied to my own career path, in that I want to learn more about students who come from multiple cultural backgrounds. Even when we survey students on our campus as administrators for demographic information, we often ask students to identify themselves by choosing one culture or race to define who they are. Just by asking students to do that, we are essentially forcing them to decide if they are more of one race or ethnicity or another. Or even worse, we're asking them to choose to identify a race or group that will possibly make it easier for them while they go to school. Given a choice in her schools in America, Moaveni probably identified as an American or as a non-Hispanic or a white or anything that would save her from identifying as Iranian or Middle Eastern, for fear of what could happen if she did. I would like to apply what I learned reading this book by finding ways to allow our students to identify as multiracial or multicultural, and then to be themselves without fearing what that might mean.